I told myself we weren't seeing things. That's what you do in head-splitting cold. Name the trick before it names you. The wind knifed through our thermal gear and made the seams sound like whispers. 6 of us fanned across the ice in standard formation, boots popping the crust with that brittle, chalky crack you feel in your teeth. Cook. Ronnie's voice climbed out of my headset like breath on glass. You seeing this? At first, it was a bulge in the white. The Arctic loves false shapes, sundogs, refractions, snow's own kind of mirage. Then the bulge learned a language my brain recognized. Angles, ribs, rivets. Hold position, I raised a fist. Shadows froze behind me. Wayne with his scanner, Elijah with the med pack, Hunter on comms, Ronnie close enough to read my jaw in the blown snow. Wayne swept the instrument like a divining rod. Nothing, Captain. No heat, no metal. According to this, there's nothing there. But there was. 200 yards ahead, a fuselage sat in the snow as if the cold itself had built it. Gray skin, black iron crosses crisp as new paint, wings wearing drifts like shawls. Heinkel, I murmured as we closed, the word lifting a ghost from my grandfather's bookcase. He-111, twin-engine Luftwaffe workhorse. It should have been a carcass. Instead, it looked factory fresh. No pits, no bloom of rust, no rubber turned to stone. Just a plane that had stopped time and asked the world to step around it. We advanced at a pace that kept our breath from fogging the inside of our masks. Hunter spoke to base, voice steady, words clipped. Elijah flexed his gloved fingers over the med kit he didn't expect to open today. The wind moved in pulses like the sea. Up close, the iron cross on the fuselage had that museum polish sheen. I pressed my glove to it. The shock came not from cold, but from certainty, matter answering matter. It's here, I said. Saying it made the air feel heavier, as if the sky leaned down to listen. Perimeter, I told Wayne, Hunter, Elijah. Ronnie with me. We shoveled the belly hatch clear. Metal scraped ice, the sound brittle and traveling. The hatch fought, then relented with a groan that had learned to be quiet for 70 years and forgot how. The breath that spilled out wasn't rot. It was nothing, like a room that had agreed not to age. I clicked my light. Standard drill, sidearm drawn, muzzle down. We slid inside one by one, boots announcing ourselves to the bones of an aircraft that refused to be bones. The bomb bay was bare and immaculate, cables still wrapped, paint still dull with pride. I panned to the cockpit door and listened, habit from cities where doors kept secrets, silence deep enough to feel. Ready? I asked. Ronnie's nod was a weight in the dark. The door swung, catching stale air. My light found the pilot's chair. A figure was strapped in. Not a skeleton, not jerky and linen. A person, skin thin to parchment, eyes closed as if squinting at sunlight he'd lost. I took one step, then stopped because the eyelids fluttered like someone's first breath in the morning. Jesus, Ronnie whispered, and the name steamed the room. He's alive. The gun holstered itself by instinct. I called Elijah in, then Wayne. Hunter stayed on the net, words moving to base faster than our thoughts could keep up. Elijah's hands worked, pulse present, weak, breathing shallow. He's cold but not frozen. The old man's lips trembled against the desert of his face. Soundless words. Wayne bent, head tilted. German. He keeps repeating something about returning, waiting, darkness. The light in my hand made every dial glitter like fresh water. I felt the wrongness move from my skin to my bones. Herman and McGuire would be wheels up in minutes. I knew the way their rotor wash would flatten the snow, how Herman's hands settled an aircraft like a mother shaping a bedspread. Backboard and neck stabilization, Elijah said, voice back in the corridor of training. He'll break if we breathe too hard. We did the impossible thing, eased a man of 70 lost years out of his chair. His uniform crumbled where our fingers asked too much of it. He weighed less than a full pack, but the air around him weighed more. Outside, the sky had contracted into that low Arctic gray that makes daylight feel like a memory. We raised the thermal tent. I lit a flare for the bird we hadn't heard yet. Snow was 100 mirrors catching fire. You can hear Herman's rotor before you see the bird. It thumps like a steady heart. The Black Hawk shouldered through spindrift, settled in the circle of our flares, and exhaled a medical team who moved with the right kind of urgency. What the hell do you have, cook? Herman shouted over the world. You wouldn't believe me, I answered, and meant it. Just get him home. We handed the impossible to the plausible. They hustled him aboard. The door slid. McGuire's thumb rose from the cockpit, half a joke, half a promise. The wind lifted as if to watch. The pilots lifted too. The radio cracked. Herman's voice pitched into a place I'd never heard from her. Mayday, mayday, controls not. The Black Hawk yawed. Not the slow, practiced pivot of a pro. A sudden drunk lurch, the tail trying to argue with physics. The bird spun, rotor disc tilting like a plate about to shatter. My throat made a sound I didn't recognize as mine. Herman, pull up! Only alarms answered. The bird pinwheeled behind the low ridge to our west. Snow geysered, then turned orange. Heat rolled over us a beat later, late to a party it should never have been invited to. A column of smoke unspooled into the clean gray sky the way ink enters water and decides to stay. I ran. So did everyone. I knew we were too late. I ran anyway because that's the only prayer we're issued. By the time we crested the ridge, the soundtrack had gone to hush. The wreck was a black mouth eating snow. There are silences you learn in service, fresh, stretched, final. This one had Herman's name in it and McGuire's and the names of people who raised you by trusting you. We stood there while the cold found the seams again and repopulated us with chill. My radio was a stone in my hand. I could feel each knuckle whiten around it until the pain cut through the numb and gave me back my body. Captain? Wayne's voice arrived from another life. Orders? I swallowed around the ash in my throat. Call it in, I said. The steadiness in my voice felt borrowed. Aircraft down. No survivors. Request immediate extraction. Hunter's hands were steady on the net even as his cheeks had gone young with shock. Elijah's breath stood in front of his face like a curtain. Ronnie's eyes wouldn't leave the smoke. Mine couldn't either. And him? Ronnie asked. Chin toward the thermal tent the wind wanted to flatten, the survivor the cold had kept. We keep him breathing, I said. We wait for extraction. And we figure out what the hell just reached its hand out of that plane and swatted a Black Hawk. Sir, Wayne said carefully, if it's connected. It's connected. I didn't raise my voice. The conviction lived low, close to bone. Herman doesn't just fall out of the sky. The wind turned. The smell of burning fuel came thin and late. I looked at the Heinkel half buried in its throne of snow. The iron cross still shone like it had been painted an hour ago. Back inside, I said, there's an answer in there. We missed it. We went. Lights on. Formation tight. The hatch yawned as if surprised to see us so soon. Inside, the cold was a different breed. Dense. Cellar still. We moved through the bomb bay, past the cockpit we had unmade by mercy, into the rear compartment where cargo waits like a held breath. Crates lined the ribs with obedient straps, German stencils. Wayne's light touched letters and muttered translations, rations, ammunition, medical stock. Ronnie pulled a canvas aside and showed glass, gauges, instruments that felt more lab than war. At the very back, my beam found a long, dark container, 7 feet by 3, the shape that makes certain thoughts start without permission. The clasps were simple. The warning was not. It wasn't paint. It was cut into the metal itself, lapped the words shallow and stubborn. Wayne traced them with a glove. He read them out, mouth working around syllables that preferred another century. Then he gave me the plain version. Do not open. Do not let it out. Do not let it die. We looked at the box the way you look at water just before you fall in. Sir, Wayne said, soft with respect and fear, don't. Herman's voice was still in my ear, clipped off mid-sentence. My hands knew what they were going to do before I did. We need to know, I said. I reached for the first latch. The first latch clicked open with the soft finality of a door that had been waiting for this exact mistake. Metal flexed against metal, quiet, almost relieved. Sir, Wayne said again, voice a notch lower. For the record. I know, I interrupted. Bad idea, logged and noted. The second latch followed, reluctant at first, then surrendering like something sighing in its sleep. The third gave easily, too easily, and I felt that strange vibration through the gloves, as if the cold metal had a heartbeat of its own. Captain, Elijah's voice over comms, That pilot's vitals just spiked. He's awake. I froze. Define awake. Heart rate tripled. Blood pressure off the charts. He's moving. Secure him, I said, though the words barely came out. Ronnie shifted beside me, rifle half raised. He knows what we're doing. Fourth latch. Click. 5 seconds stretched long enough to question every choice I'd ever made. The last latch was stiff, almost locked by will rather than corrosion. I leaned my weight into it. It gave with a crack that echoed through the fuselage like thunder trapped in metal lungs. Then silence. Not the usual hush of snow, something deeper, like the world holding its breath. I lifted the lid. For a heartbeat, there was only the creak of hinges. Then the darkness inside seemed to lift itself. It didn't rise like vapor. It spilled. Blackness poured out thick and liquid, curling around my boots, flowing over the floor like oil that had learned how to move. Gas leak? Hunter asked, voice thin. No smell, Wayne said. No chemical signature. He never finished. The mist rose, faster, up to our knees, our waists, our shoulders. The light from our flashlights diffused into it, swallowed mid-beam. It wasn't cold like snow or steam. It was a thinking cold, the kind that observes you back. Form up, I barked. Circle, backs to center. Shapes moved in the dark. My men, the crates, the edges of sanity. Then footsteps, slow, uneven, coming from the container we had just opened. Anyone see that? Ronnie's voice cracked. Movement, 3 o'clock. The mist thinned just enough to show an outline. Tall, human, almost. It stepped closer. The pilot, but not the frail, half-dead man we'd lifted out hours ago. This thing wore his uniform, but its frame was swollen, stretched, the jaw too long, the skin slack and wrong, rippling with something beneath. The eyes, black from edge to edge, absorbing the light. Contact, I shouted. Gunfire erupted inside the cargo hold, deafening in the confined space. Muzzle flashes carved strobe light images of the creature lurching forward, arms jerking, mouth splitting wide enough to dislocate. Bullets tore through it. No blood, just black vapor seeping from the holes, curling back into the wounds like smoke being inhaled in reverse. Keep firing, I yelled. Ronnie's rifle jammed. He cursed, switched to sidearm. The creature pivoted unnaturally fast and lunged straight at Hunter. It hit him with a sound like meat and metal colliding. Hunter flew backward into a crate, crumpling. I fired point blank until my clip clicked dry, then drew my combat knife, the steel shaking in my good hand. When it lunged again, I slashed across its throat. The blade bit deep, and the thing screamed. A sound too many voices wide, layered with radio static and wind. Black vapor erupted from the wound. It stank like ozone and earth turned centuries old. My flashlight flickered, sputtered out. Stay back, I shouted, stepping away, but it grabbed my shoulder, the same one that would never quite heal, and squeezed. Bones cracked like twigs. Pain detonated up my spine. I drove the knife under its ribs, deep and desperate. It froze. The scream stopped. Then the black vapor reversed course, flooding back into the wound, dragging the creature's collapsing body upright like a puppet restringing itself. It fell backward, shuddered, convulsed, the skin tightening, darkening. Within seconds, the uniform deflated, leaving nothing but dust and empty fabric. We stared at the spot, weapons still drawn, the sound of our own breathing, the only proof we were alive. Is it dead? Hunter's voice cracked from where he lay against the wall. Yeah, I said. I think. The plane groaned. Long, low, metallic, the kind of sound that doesn't belong to the present. Rust blossomed across the walls like fast-forward footage. Paint blistered, wires snapped. The pristine bomber was rotting before our eyes. That's not possible, Wayne whispered. The ceiling split with a scream of metal. Rivets exploded like gunshots. Move, I shouted. Get to the hatch. We ran. The floor trembled, buckled, peeled apart. Panels rained down around us, each impact echoing louder. Hunter stumbled but kept moving. Elijah dragged him upright. Ronnie covered our rear, blood already soaking through his pant leg from a sharp fragment that had cut him open. We dove through the hatch just as the fuselage imploded. The entire aircraft folded in on itself, aging decades in seconds. The wings drooped, snapped, vanished beneath a storm of rust that the wind carried away like dust. We sprawled on the snow, gasping, watching as the last remnants dissolved into the white horizon. Within minutes, there was nothing left. No wreckage, no proof, just the wind already erasing our footprints. Ronnie groaned. Blood poured from his leg, dark against the snow. Elijah was at his side in an instant, pressing gauze, his breath fogging fast. Deep laceration, through muscle, maybe bone. Need stitches now. Do it, I said. He worked with steady hands while the rest of us built a thermal tent against the screaming wind. When we finally ducked inside, the silence returned. Fragile, waiting. Wayne sat opposite me, face pale under the red emergency light. We just erased history, Captain. No, I said quietly. History erased itself. Outside, the snow kept falling. Somewhere beneath it, the Arctic slept, but not peacefully. We stayed in that tent longer than the cold allowed sense to. 4 hours until extraction, Base had said. The weather had other plans. The wind came in gusts that sounded like language, half syllables, deep vowels. It pressed the fabric walls in and out like lungs. Every few minutes the ground trembled, just enough to make the heating unit rattle. Elijah kept pressure on Ronnie's leg, changing dressings as fast as the blood could soak them. He'll make it, he said between clenched teeth, but we need proper medevac soon. I nodded. My shoulder burned where the thing had grabbed me. The ache went deeper than bone. I flexed my fingers. They moved slower than they should. Wayne sat across from me, light from his wrist lamp flickering across his face. Sir, it's not gone. I looked up. What? He swallowed. That mist. It wasn't just inside the plane. Look at the scanner. He turned the screen so I could see. Static. Blank field 1 second, then brief flashes. Shapes, bursts of heat that vanished before registering. The Arctic was supposed to be an absence, but the screen pulsed like a heartbeat. Interference? I asked, though I didn't believe it. Wayne shook his head. No signal this strong should exist out here. Not natural, not atmospheric. Outside, something brushed the tent wall. A ripple in the fabrics. Hunter was already aiming his rifle at the sound. Movement. 2 o'clock. Elijah froze, hands still on the bandage. Ronnie's eyes opened, wide and glassy. The shape passed again, a darker shadow against the dim light of the snow. Then it was gone. We waited, breath held, the sound of our own hearts louder than the storm. Minutes later, the radio crackled. Rescue 1 to ground team. Do you copy? Hunter lunged for the receiver. Copy, Rescue 1. We read you. Approaching your coordinates. Weather rough. 5 minutes out. I exhaled. Understood. LZ clear, northeast wind, 30 knots. We'll mark with flares. Wayne and I crawled out into the white. The cold hit like a physical blow after the heat of the tent. We worked in silence, planting flares in a wide circle, orange sparks hissing in the wind. The horizon was blank for a long minute, then the air began to tremble. The heavy, rhythmic beat of rotor blades came from the south. Searchlight cutting through snow. The helicopter hovered, cautious, rotors throwing up spirals of frost. I waved both arms, then pointed toward the tent. The pilot descended slowly, maintaining altitude higher than standard. No one wanted to repeat Herman's fall. The door slid open. 2 figures stepped out, rifles low but ready. Captain Walter Payne and Lieutenant Grace Ramos, faces I trusted from missions that had never asked this much of belief. Captain Cook! Payne's voice carried over the rotors. Status? 4 personnel, 1 wounded, all accounted for. No hostiles. He came closer, scanning the horizon like he expected it to answer back. We heard about Herman. What happened? I'll brief you airborne. We need to move. Payne nodded once. Understood. Ramos went for Ronnie, supporting his good side while Elijah helped from the other. We moved fast, boots crunching, snow tearing open under weight, at every gust of wind whispering against my ear like static words. When I stepped into the chopper, the heat and engine noise were almost merciful. The door slammed shut, rotors shifted pitch, and we rose from the cursed snow. For a moment, I let myself believe we were safe. Payne leaned in. Now talk to me. I hesitated. Looked at my men, Wayne's jaw locked, Elijah pale, Hunter staring through the floor. We found a bomber, I said finally. German, intact, with a pilot still alive. Ramos blinked. Alive? Not anymore, I said. Not exactly. Payne frowned, waiting for more. I gave him the shortened version: Discovery, the impossible preservation, the container, the black mist. I left out the sound, the scream that still lived in the back of my skull. When I finished, Payne's expression hadn't changed. Only his eyes had lost their focus, turning inward. You sure of what you saw? Dead sure, I said. He looked away, jaw working, then spoke into his headset. Base, this is Rescue 1. We've got Cook's team on board, 1 wounded, preparing for return. The rest of the flight passed in a silence heavy with what none of us could say. Back at base, everything blurred. Medical teams, debrief rooms, fluorescent lights too bright after the Arctic dim. I wrote the report they asked for, every word exact, no embellishment. When I signed the last page, I knew it would vanish into a vault no one would open. 2 days later, I was called to Colonel Ruiz's office. She sat behind her desk, hair in that severe knot she'd worn since I'd known her. My report lay open, edges marked with red tabs. Captain Cook, she said without looking up. You've had a long week. Yes, ma'am. She closed the folder. This mission is now classified level 5. Effective immediately, your official statement will record a reconnaissance of a weather anomaly. Herman and McGuire's deaths are logged as mechanical failure during a blizzard. Ma'am, she raised a hand. That's final. I stood there, pulse in my shoulder throbbing like memory. With respect, that's not what happened. The truth, she said quietly, is what prevents panic. You did your duty. Let that be enough. I understood what she meant, and I hated that I did. The next weeks dissolved into interviews with people who didn't give names. Military intelligence, scientific research, something called the Special Circumstances Unit. They all asked the same questions from different angles, like circling dogs smelling the same wound. None of them gave answers. Ronnie healed. Wayne transferred to intelligence. Elijah and Hunter stayed under my command, but we never spoke of it again. The official record said weather anomaly. Herman and McGuire got commendations and folded flags, and the Arctic kept its secret. But at night I'd wake up with the smell of ozone and rust in my nose, shoulder aching where the thing had touched me. Sometimes I could still hear Herman's voice breaking into static. 3 months later, the envelope arrived. Plain Manila. No return address. My name typed cleanly on the front. Inside was a single black and white photograph. 8 Luftwaffe crewmen standing in front of a Heinkel 111, smiling, young, alive. The date on the bottom, 1943. Someone had circled the pilot in red ink. It was him, the man we'd pulled from the ice. On the back, a message printed in block letters, lost in transit. Cargo experimental, do not pursue. I stared at the words until they burned into my mind. Then I took out my lighter and burned the photograph, watched the faces curl and blacken until they were dust. But the smell that rose from the flame wasn't paper, it was ozone. The smell stayed long after the flame died. Ozone and old air, the kind that clings to metal buried too long in ice. I crushed the ashes, emptied them into the sink, and watched the water turn gray before swirling away. For a moment, I thought I saw the shape of an eye in the drifting soot. Just coincidence, I told myself. Then I turned off the tap and walked out. Emmy called from the living room. Dinner's ready. Her voice was the anchor that kept me from drifting too far. We ate pasta and garlic bread. Normal food, normal light, normal talk. She laughed about her students. I pretended to laugh too. But every time I blinked, I saw that red circle around the pilot's face. That night, I dreamed of the Arctic. Not the real one, but a kind of memory loop. Herman's voice repeating the Mayday call until it merged with the wind. The black mist creeping across the snow, tracing letters I couldn't read. I woke at 2:37 a.m. My shoulder burned, that same cold ache crawling through bone. Emmy slept peacefully beside me, her hand warm on my chest. I lay there until the first blue of dawn filled the window. Days turned to weeks, then months, and somehow life continued. I deployed again. Other places this time, Afghanistan, Syria, Colombia, places where threats were human and dying made sense. My team changed, rotated, aged. We learned how to live with the unexplainable by pretending it had never happened. Wayne transferred fully into intelligence. He sent me coded messages sometimes, short, clipped, always vague, Found cross-reference Project Icegrube, or pattern repeats. You were first. I never replied. Years later, when I finally retired, my file was a clean story. Decorated officer, multiple tours, honorable discharge. The Arctic incident had vanished from the record, but I carried it in my bones. Emmy and I moved to Oregon. We bought a house near the base of Mount Hood. Quiet, safe, ordinary. She took a teaching job at the local elementary school. I did consulting work for private firms, security, logistics, the kind of routine problem solving that keeps the mind busy enough to silence memory. Sometimes I almost believed I'd outrun it, but the shoulder never healed. Every winter it flared up like the cold had followed me home. Doctors said nerve damage. I knew better. Then one morning, years later, I woke before dawn with the taste of metal in my mouth. I sat on the porch with coffee gone cold, the mountains turning purple under the first light. 20 years since the Arctic. Emmy's inside, humming over the stove, cooking bacon. We'd built a life worth living. 2 kids, a grandson who asks too many questions. It should have been enough. But the wind was wrong. It came from the north, sharp, electric, and carrying that faint smell again. I told myself it was just memory. That smell doesn't travel continents. Still, I couldn't shake the sense of something listening. Later that morning, I split wood behind the house. The rhythm helped. Each swing of the axe was a heartbeat, each crack of timber another second between me and the past. Emmy always teased me for doing it by hand when I could buy a splitter. I told her it was for the exercise. But really, it was for control. Something clean, predictable, honest. Wood splits, time moves. The world makes sense. When the last log split, I stacked it neatly and stood there, breathing steam into the cold air. And then, faint but distinct from somewhere in the trees behind our property, a sound. A deep, hollow thud followed by the faint rattle of metal on metal, the kind of echo you'd expect in a hangar, not a forest. I turned toward it, axe still in hand. Nothing. Just the rustle of wind through the pines, then another thud. Fainter, farther. I waited until the quiet came back and told myself I'd imagined it. That night, after Emmy went to bed, I opened my old military locker, the one she thought was full of commendations and keepsakes. Inside were the artifacts I never reported, scraps of frost-stained canvas from the bomber, a warped bullet casing that had passed through something that didn't bleed, and one of Wayne's old data chips labeled EIS Grube. I hadn't touched it in years. But that night, I powered up the old laptop, slid the chip in, and waited. There was only one file, video00043.mp4. I clicked it. Static. Then an image flickered into focus, the cockpit of the Heinkel, snow falling through a shattered windshield. The camera panned slowly, deliberately. The pilot's seat was empty. Then the view turned outward through the glass. For just a second, the lens caught a reflection, a figure standing outside the plane, half shadow, half man. It looked directly into the camera and smiled. The footage ended. I sat there in the dark, the blue light of the laptop painting my face. Outside, the wind picked up again. In it, for just a moment, I thought I heard the hum of rotor blades, slow, steady, familiar, like the sound of a helicopter turning forever in a sky that wouldn't let go. I closed the laptop, unplugged it, and carried it out to the fire pit. The flames took it quickly. By morning, only blackened metal and glass remained. Emmy asked what the smell was when she came outside. Just clearing some old junk, I told her. She nodded, kissed my cheek, and went back inside. I stood there long after she'd gone, staring north. The mountains glowed with early sun, and for a heartbeat, the snow on their peaks shimmered the same cold silver as aircraft metal. And in that light, I thought I saw something move across the ridge, a brief flash, a curve of wing, gone before I could focus. Maybe it was a bird, maybe not. But the wind that followed carried that same faint whisper I'd heard years ago in the Arctic. Not words exactly, but something close to them. A reminder that some things don't stay buried. They wait. And sometimes, when the world grows quiet enough, they listen back. Story complete.